Thank you
Hi.
again for meeting with us. I really admired your work on literature and media, and I'm really excited to have a chance to talk with you about how reading is evolving and what it means to study literature today. To start off, I'm curious about your personal relationship with reading. Has the way you think about reading changed since you started studying professionally? Because I imagine reading might feel different when it becomes a part of your academic life. So I'd love to hear how that has shifted over time for you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to be here and for having me on this interview. It's great to talk with you. Yes, definitely. How I think about reading has changed a lot since I started, doing it and studying it professionally. It's changed in so many ways. I think many English professors want to become English professors because we love reading and we want to spend a lot of time doing it. But the irony is that once you become an English professor, between teaching classes and advising students and serving on committees and running programs and doing your own research and writing, you have sort of less time for reading than ever, unfortunately, because reading takes a lot of time, and which is something I'm also interested in. And so when I do have time for reading, such as now during the summer, I experience that time as like a great luxury. And it seems perhaps even more special than it felt when I was younger and not a quote unquote professional reader. I think another way that my thinking about reading has changed is that I've become fascinated in reading per se. And this is to a large degree, not just because of my interest in fields like book history, which is a field where scholars study how books have been published and received by reading publics across time, since the 16th century moving forward, not only because of my research interest in that field, and in sort of digital media and how people read online today and trying to bring those two things together, but also because of my students, and watching them in my classes and how they read and hearing them talk about how they read and why they're interested in being English majors, and what drew them to reading in the first place. And that has really got me interested in reading as an activity in of itself, and in the ways in which we value and don't value reading in our society and in our contemporary culture. So in many ways, reading, why people read, what they get out of it, why they want to do it, why and how our culture tells you that you need to both be a good reader and that reading is a waste of time at the same time. All of that stuff is really fascinating and has become sort of one among many of these questions that fascinates me as a scholar. And that's come to a large degree out of hearing my students talk about it.
Thank you for that. Switching gears a bit, your research touches on how new media platforms are influencing reading habits, especially among younger audiences.
Mhm.
You study how social media like Book Talk is changing how people read. Do you think it's getting more people interested in reading?
Mhm.
I'm especially curious about whether the kind of engagement we're seeing online is meaningful or more like surface level, maybe both.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the answer is, of course, both. It's really hard to say. There are many studies out right now that show us that people are spending less time reading for pleasure than ever at any point since those studies started in the 20th century. But I do think that one thing that social media like Book Talk does well is to build excitement and community around reading. And when you build that type of excitement and community, it matters less, at least to me, whether or not people are quote unquote actually reading. I know that might sound a little bit counterintuitive, and it matters more that they are taking time out of their busy days when they don't have to be doing this to talk about books and to talk about reading and to talk about being a reader. And I think there's a community out there on Book Talk, that curious people can join and participate in themselves. And there's a pretty low bar for participation. And so it turns reading into a social activity, which it's been always a social activity, but it makes that social activity really visible and sort of more easily findable, for anyone out there who might be curious about it. And I think it's certainly Book Talk has been successful for a small handful of authors and a slightly larger group of books that have become sort of blockbuster hits due to attention that they've garnered on Book Talk. And I think one of the things that I find most fascinating about Book Talk as a researcher is this visibility that it provides to what everyday non-professional quote unquote amateur readers, how they're reading, what they're saying about reading, what they're saying about why they value reading and why they want to do it. That to me is what makes thinking about book talk as a researcher, as someone who's interested in why people read today and how they do it, really fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, it's such a complex space, but it definitely feels
Yes.
like it's reshaping the way books circulate and how readers find a community.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah,
also think that, just a quick addition, that publishing companies have started to try and wrap their heads around how book talk is changing how marketing works for contemporary literature, and particularly contemporary literature, particular clients like romance or romantasy, the genres that are really popular on book talk. And these publishing houses have tried to harness that power in ways that have been more successful in some cases and less successful in others. But they're sort of lagging behind book talk itself and trying to figure out how to turn book talk into a marketing machine, which it is to some degree. But I also think that they're not ever gonna be fully successful because of its ground up orientation, the fact that it comes from the readers themselves and not from the publishers by and large.
on that note, I wanted to ask for your perspective as both of a scholar and a teacher. What's a book you think every teenager should read and why? There's so much out there, but I'm curious if there's one that stands out to you, whether for how it challenges young readers or helps them see the world differently.
Yeah, this is such a great question and such a hard one. Anytime anyone asks me for a book recommendation, it's so hard for me to limit myself. But I've come up with two. I couldn't do one, but I've done two. And sort of one is geared toward a little bit younger teens, and one's a little bit older teens. So the first one would be A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. If you love sci-fi and fantasy, if you're someone who's really gotten into ACOTAR series, for example, or other ones like that, you should try this coming of age story from the 1960s. So it's a bit older, but it's about a girl who travels through time and space to kind of protect those people that she loves. I have really vivid memories of reading this myself as a very young teenager, and it made a really deep impression on me. So I definitely recommend A Wrinkle in Time. The second recommendation I have is for a little bit older teenage readers, those who, might be in the later years of high school. I think Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's a classic. It's one that everyone knows and everyone should read. It's a tough read, but I think it's one that will help readers to cultivate a love for language and for the beauty of language and the beauty of reading, and to understand, as put as generally as possible, the human condition and the history of the United States a little bit better. So those are the two that I think I recommend the most.
Those are great recommendations. I've read Wrinkle in a Time, and that
Mm,
book is really such an amazing book.
yes.
Yeah, and finally, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and ask a broader question.
Mhm.
What's the most fulfilling part about
Mm,
studying and teaching literature at Cornell? I know that kind of work can be challenging, but also
mhm.
really meaningful. So I'd love to hear what continues to inspire you in your role.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it's the simplest answer is just the people, and that includes my student and my colleagues, but also really the students that I teach. The students are super smart at all levels. They're engaged, they're extremely curious, they're passionate. They have grown up in a world that doesn't really value taking the time to read literature, that tells them that being an English major is a waste of time, that they'll never get a job, yada yada yada. And yet, nevertheless, there they are in my classroom, bringing their brilliant ideas and their passion, and taking a lot of time throughout the semester to engage seriously with ideas about literature and culture and with each other and with me, which I just find genuinely inspiring. I know it sounds a little bit hokey, but every semester I'm inspired anew by these students. They're ambitious in all the best ways. They work really hard. They're great writers. They're extremely creative, and they're really great thinkers and sort of blossoming researchers in their own right. I feel so lucky to teach these students, and it helps me to hang on to a lot of hope for the future in times when that hope can feel more fleeting. And so I'm just so grateful to have the chance to work with these students at Cornell.
That's so just inspiring. I love English and literature, so thank you so much.
Keep doing it. Keep reading.
Thank you. Tara, do you want to ask your questions?
Thank you so much, Clara. My name is Tara, and I'm so excited to be able to speak with you today. So for our first question, I would like to know, if you were to write another full-length contemporary book, what particular event would you write about?
This is a tough question. So I'm, a scholar. I'm not a writer of fiction, and so I think for me, I'll sort of talk about maybe two different projects that I'm working on that are more sort of scholarly at the moment, and we'll see if they turn out to be books or not. So I'm working on the first, the sort of history of the novelistic length, or how long novels are in the 20th century. This uses data from about 60,000 digitized novels to understand trends in the lengths of novels over the course of this time period. So did novels get longer? Did they get shorter? Why? It does seem like there are a couple moments in time in the 20th century when novels did get longer, and I'm sort of interested in trying to think about why that happened. Were there technological changes that permitted easier printing of longer novels, for example? Did people get interested in reading in different ways? In the case of some of these novels, they may have been bestsellers when they were first published, but now they're no longer read, or they're largely ignored by scholars or kind of forgotten. In the case of other novels, they were never popular in the first place. But sort of in both cases, I'm interested in, once again, the value of length. Like, why do we have this idea in our culture that longer novels are somehow smarter, or might be better, or they might be more complicated, or they might be more challenging, or they give the reader a kind of cachet that a reader might not get from a shorter novel. So I'm just interested in this question of what happens when novels are long, and how and why do we value that? The second, so that's again not quite an event, but it's an idea. And the second project that I'm working on is about histories of not reading, or histories of offloading reading to machines, to computers. So I'm interested in the literary histories of speed reading in the mid 20th century. There was this idea that you could train people to read at the pace of an electronic computer. I'm interested in the history of optical character recognition, which is a technique that scans text and makes it into data that computers can process. I'm interested in histories of computational text generation that precede our current moment of Gen AI, and what that looked like in earlier moments. And I'm interested in communities that formed, online communities, particularly that form around, for example, being in proximity to books, but not necessarily reading them. So both of those projects are kind of about not reading in the 20th and 21st centuries. So that's what I'm working on right now.
That's really interesting, especially to me in generation like Z, when a bunch of people, like the attention spans of so many individuals are at an all-time low, and books are becoming less and less appealing. I think that's a great topic to write about, and I would love to read
Yeah,
that.
it's certainly inspired by this ever, pervasive narrative that no one wants to read anymore. No one wants to spend their time reading. So I'm interested in, is that true, and why? Yeah.
That's a great topic. Thank you. For our next question, I would like to ask you, if you had any advice to any girls watching, what is something you would tell them before they write their first book?
Oh, really good question. I think the main thing I'd want to say is that writing is hard work, and it won't happen all at once, and it won't happen in a day or even a week or a month. It'll take many months and probably years. It takes a long time. So I think I would just say, be generous with yourself as you figure it out. At the same time, I think the best way to become a writer, to be a writer, is to write often. You should write a little bit, I think, every day that you can, almost every day, especially early on, to get into the habit of it and to develop a confidence around writing, to know that you can do it, and to learn to quiet that sort of inner critic that we all have, that tells you that what you're doing is not good enough, or it's not smart enough, or it's stupid. And just to learn to tell that inner critic to shut up for a while you're writing. You can bring that critic out later when you're revising, but at first it's just important to write a little bit every day and to get words down on the page, as it were. Yeah.
That is some great advice. I am definitely going to take that to heart as someone who is really interested in writing, and I really hope to write my own book one day.
Great.
For my next question, it's been said you are currently working on a book at the moment. What has been the most rewarding, and what has been the most strenuous part about the writing process for you?
Yeah. Rewarding is getting to read a lot, having time to read a lot, organizing and analyzing data that no one has organized or analyzed in this particular way before. So doing some new stuff. I think also talking to people about my ideas. I've had the opportunity to travel around a bit this spring and summer and talk to other scholars about what I'm doing. That's been extremely rewarding. And then beginning to just try and articulate what it is I'm trying to do with these projects. I think the most strenuous parts are, as always, figuring out how all the various ideas and topics and concepts that I have or that I've written about, how they all connect to one another. Right now, I sort of have groups of isolated ideas and that aren't chapters, that aren't a coherent thing. And I'm now at the stage where I have to try to make them a coherent thing. So that's the hardest part, is figuring out how all of this connects to make a coherent argument over the course of the book.
That's a great response, honestly. It's really impressive and inspiring how you've done all this and written all these like amazing works and dedicated your life to English. So unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, but I think it's an impactful one. At what point in your life did you realize you wanted to dedicate your life to writing?
For me, it happened really slowly. I was always a reader and a writer, a lover of the written word. I spent a lot of time growing up reading and writing for myself. But I went to college on a basketball scholarship, and my plan had always been to continue playing basketball professionally after college. But while I was in college, I happened upon some English classes. Then I took more of them. I ended up taking a bunch of literature classes, majoring in English. And at the end of that, I just simply wanted to know more. I became so curious about literature and literary culture. I had to know more. I had to do it more. 4 years wasn't enough for me. I loved reading and writing, and more even than that, I loved thinking about reading and writing, and being among people who take it seriously was a new experience for me and something I really loved. And so I decided at the last minute of my college years to apply for a master's degree program in English to see if it was something I wanted to do. I was lucky enough to get in. I went, and from day one, I loved it. And I felt like I had found my people and felt like I had found something that I was really passionate about and that I could imagine myself doing for the rest of my life. And so I got there. I immediately loved it. I realized I wanted to try and stay in academia if I could, and I haven't looked back. So it was a kind of slow process for me, but one that culminated in my decision to get my PhD and go from there.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing response, and I really admire your hunger for knowledge in the field of English. It's truly inspiring to us, and I hope it inspires all of our viewers watching. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an amazing experience to hear from you. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You're such like an inspiration.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me again. I love what you guys are doing. Keep doing it. And I feel very, honored to have been invited. So thank you very much.
Have a good day. Thank you so much.
All right.